We're going to visit the oldest piece of rock art in the British Isles, together with the man who found it in 2010. Archaeologist Professor George Nash has researched all over the world, including Israel, Mongolia and South America, is affiliated to universities in Portugal and Bristol, and has written over 30 books. But his most famous discovery was here in South Wales, in a cave on the Gower Peninsula.
I'm now moving around to the actual figure itself. This is the head area, moving towards the torso, coming towards the back of the animal now, and running down towards the legs.
Good to see you, George. What is rock art?
Well, it's a multitude of things really. I mean, I would like to take it down to its base level, because what I look at as art may be completely different to other people. So I would call it a visual communication system. It's a way of communicating a message, either semiotic or visually, to another person or group of people. So that's what I think it's where rock art comes from.
Is it specifically something that's prehistoric or ancient, or is it something that could be of any period?
It can be of anything really. I mean, the one thing I've been taking an interest in recently in terms of research has been modern graffiti. And I think a lot of the mechanisms of modern graffiti, such as territoriality, such as signatures, expressing who is doing what, is a way of communicating those messages across to other groups, either gangland groups, for example, or gangs within a chosen community.
So what makes this particular site so special?
The reason why it's so special is because at the time of discovery in 2010, it was only one of two sites in the whole of the British Isles which were of Paleolithic date. Plenty of portable art roaming around the landscape and in our museums, but only two sites, one at Creswell Crags and one here at Cadw.
And you personally made this discovery in 2010. That must have been a great moment for you. How did it feel?
Absolutely amazing. It was a life changer in many respects, because I'd done a lot of philosophy of rock art. I taught it. I'd did a massive corpus in Norway, and then one day with my Bristol University students, I came here like we did every year, and I just said, right, I'm going to look around. I just had a hunch that there may be something at the back of the cave. So within about 10 minutes, there it was. There's this very, very tiny niche in the back of the cave, and I just could see the faint scratches which looked like human agency, so they weren't natural, and then voila, and this is why we're here.
What exactly did you see?
Well, the engraving was in a niche and very, very difficult to photograph. I could just about see the engraved lines of an animal, wasn't quite sure what it was. And then when I got my camera and put the camera against the back wall and started to film it, I could instantly see then I was dealing with a cervid, or it was either an elk, a reindeer or a red deer. Because of the sweeping antlers behind its head, it looked to me as if it was a reindeer. And what we've got there are a series of lines. We've got a head, we've got a torso, and we've got 4 legs. And what is quite curious, and it's very, very similar to Lascaux, we've got a potential arrow in one of the legs. So it's a hunted reindeer. And one can imagine 14,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers, advanced hunter-gatherers, standing outside the cave, watching the migratory animals going past their cave, along this very, very narrow valley, and thinking, I'll have that one there.
You must have asked yourself the question, how can we be sure that this is what I think it is, in terms of especially human agency and in terms of the dating of the engraving? So how did you go about proving that it really was what you thought?
Right, well, that's again it was a wonderful thing that happened, because when I initially made the discovery, I was always worried about about dating, because I could have inscribed that 24 hours before I discovered it. But what I needed was some form of way of dating it. You can't radiocarbon date it because there's no organics associated with the botatorial surface or the engraving. But what I was very fortunate about, that on the left-hand side of the engraving, which is a reindeer or a cervid, was a stal or stalagmite flow stone flowing over the head and the antlers of this figure. And so what I did was I called in the Open University Uranium Series dating team. They came along, took 4 samples, and from those 4 samples they were able to date the half-life of the uranium series dating stal flow over the image, and that gave me the date. And I had 2 dates. I had 2 dates of 12,800 or thereabouts BP before present, and the final one was 14,505,000 years BP before present. So it gave us a minimum date of when the rock art was constructed. It's more than likely it goes back much further.
What does this and other similar engravings and some of the dating evidence and other artifacts that have been found here, what do all those things tell us together about the people that lived here at the time?
Well, we're looking at a very complex society. I mean, if we think about our own lives, they're complex enough, but I think equally in the Upper Paleolithic, it was very complex here. Remember, this is one cave of 95 caves, which were all occupied at one point or another along the Gower coast. This is a classic limestone area. So you have the Pavilion Cave, for example, you have Bacon Hole Cave, and you have this cave. Now, what's remarkable about this cave, that when it was excavated in the 1870s, in 1957 by McBurney, the same chap who taught Prince Charles, and also Campbell, who came here in 1977, they each added a bit more of the evidence to what was going on in this cave in the the really deep distant past. And what you've got here is the best cave in the British Isles for faunal evidence. You've got a remarkable assemblage of fauna here. And also you've got a remarkable lithic assemblage as well. Also, you've got two burials here from the Bronze Age. So they were using it beyond the Paleolithic. But to give you some insight about what it was like when this engraving was probably made, was we see a tree landscape around us now, but it was treeless. About half a kilometre to the north of here, there would have been a kilometre of ice standing before you. Average summer temperatures would have been between -10 and -15. It would have been treeless. You would have sedges, mosses and lichens littering the valley. The Bristol Channel would have been an open plateau, and you would have migratory mammoth, reindeer, elk and horse roaming around the landscape, being pursued and followed by hunter-gatherers.
So we're talking about a proper Ice Age landscape here.
Exactly.
And things would not have looked like this, I imagine. Would the geography and geology have been the same as it is today, or would it have been rather different, do you think?
Well, the geology is again interesting because I hypothesise that where we see the cave entrance today, the cave entrance 14,000 years ago or thereabouts would have been where we're sitting now, maybe 4 or 5 metres away from the present day entrance.
So where we're sitting, in fact.
Yeah, exactly. So what's happening and what we're sitting on really is what we call rockfall. It's through freeze-thaw processes. The rock has shattered away in the winter because water's got into the cracks. It's frozen. It's pushed the rocks apart. And over time, over 14,000 years, the entrance has receded back and back and back. So, in many respects, although that the rock art is found 11 metres or thereabouts from the cave entrance to the back of the cave, it would have been actually more towards 20 metres back from the original entrance to the cave. And this brings me to an interesting point because a lot of caves throughout Paleolithic Europe would have had humans occupying them, but only occupying the entrances. And it's more than likely that the further back you go into the cave, the more mysterious and more ritualistic those spaces would have been. Hence the reason why you see a lot of rock art in the Dordogne and in northern Spain being painted at the back of the caves rather than around the entrance areas of the caves. So again, very interesting way about how the cave areas are being delineated during Paleolithic times.
So if that's 14,000 years ago, coming back to the present, we see that there's had to be a gate erected in front to protect the cave. What's the background there?
Well, it's quite simple. That I'm afraid there are 1 or 2 people within our society who have little respect for both flora and fauna, because this is quite an important cave for bats, but also they don't have much respect either for heritage. And what happened was that when the discovery was made, it was kept quiet for a while, but within a year, a lot of people got to know about where the site was, and it didn't take too long for somebody to find out where the rock art was, and they made an attempt to vandalise it. So it was then decided, it actually had been decided beforehand that they were going to grill the cave anyway. So it's now grilled, and you can get the experience of going into the cave, but you can't go to the back of the cave because of the grill stops you from doing that.
So how about the future then, for this site and for the wider research into this period? What can this tell us in future, and how can we look at the broader context to tell us more about this period?
Well, I think what we've got to think about a graph. And when you go into a room, into your house or my house, and you look around, you see all these bits of material culture, the television or whatever, we can account for what those actually represent. We know what the television does, we know what the table does, etc., etc. When we get back to the Paleolithic, we're talking about maybe 1%, if we're lucky, 1% of the total material culture surviving. And so, in many respects, although we think we know a lot about Cadw Cave and any other cave we look at, there's still a lot more to try and fathom out what's going on. And through hard science, in particular hard science, so through things like uranium series dating, lipid analysis, etc., we're starting to gain a little bit more information about what is going on in these finely homed sites, which will give us a bit more of an insight on what is going on.
George, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this little engraving is the oldest known piece of rock art in the British Isles at least. Together with similar art and artefacts from the time, it can tell us a surprising amount about the people who lived here 14,000 years ago.